Funny how life takes unexpected turns just when you think you've figured everything out. My name is Lillian. I'm 71 years old. I've been a widow for over a decade. And I've always been the kind of mom who fixed things with warm tea, quiet prayers, and a calm heart. The kind of prayer you whisper in the dark, holding the bedsheet with one hand and your heart with the other. I always believed faith was my greatest legacy. So when my son Caleb invited me to live with him and his wife, I thought maybe it was an answer. God giving me another chance. To hear the laughter of children running through the house again. To share my dignity with the ones I love. But not every open door is a blessing. Some come as a test. At first, everything felt right. My suitcase in the corner, the kids hugging me like it was Christmas, Jenna smiling without showing her teeth. I brought my embroidery, my spices, my gentle advice. I didn't want to be in the way. I'd wash the dishes humming softly and thank them even for the bent forks. All I needed was to see my grandkids around the table. I've always done good in silence, and God saw that, even if no one else did. But there are things the eyes can't hide. No matter how much her mouth smiled, Jenna's eyes said I didn't quite belong. Like I was a shadow that didn't fit in their light. I started noticing the gestures. When I spoke, she crossed her arms. When I got close, she stepped back just a little. Tiny things. But a mother's heart catches those details. That's when you learn to pray softer, but with more strength. I remember one night she put the kids to bed early and locked the door. I stood there in the hallway like I was listening to a soundless cry. That stung. But faith isn't the absence of pain. It's walking forward even with it. So I went back to the kitchen, reheated my tea, and gave thanks. Because gratitude in the middle of rejection is the kind of courage heaven hears loud and clear. One day my grandson fell in the backyard and scraped his knee. I rushed over, cleaned him up, blew on the wound and held him tight. He cried and said Vovo heals. Jenna showed up at that moment and just stood there watching. The boy clung to my neck, and she pressed her lips like she was holding back a scream. I felt a chill deep inside, but I kept smiling at him, drawing a heart on the bandage. Because love heals more than ointment ever will. Then I went to my room and stitched up an old cloth like patching it might somehow fix what was coming apart between us. Faith is that invisible thread you keep pulling even when it feels like it's about to snap. Caleb always told me I was welcome. But the truth is, he didn't really see what happened behind the scenes. He'd come home from work, kiss his wife's forehead, hug his kids, and think everything was fine. And I pretended it was too. Sometimes pretending is the only way to protect what little is still whole. But inside me, a quiet prayer was growing. Lord, don't let me be a burden. If there's anything hidden here, reveal it. I trust your justice. Because when truth comes from God, it never comes alone. It comes with purpose. And without realizing it, I was already standing on the edge of something that would change everything. For the first few months, I breathed gratitude. I helped with the boys, woke up early, made breakfast, sewed up school uniforms. I offered to pick them up, even when my knees ached. It gave me joy to feel useful, to feel needed. But Jenna, oh Jenna, always distant, like she was just waiting for the guest to leave. I tried to talk, asked if she needed help, but she'd answer with a polite "everything's fine" that sucked the air out of the room. She wasn't mean, just too polite. And too much politeness is sometimes the softest way of pushing someone out. One morning I baked a cornbread cake the way Caleb loved as a child. The kitchen smelled amazing. The kids were drooling. Caleb took a bite, smiled like he was back in his childhood. Jenna didn't touch it. She washed the dishes before we'd even finished eating. Everything spotless, everything controlled. I complimented the new living room decor. She replied, "Thanks, I like to keep things my way." Almost invisible, but the message was clear. That house had room for everything except me. And still, I stayed. Because a mother's heart doesn't give up easy. We keep hoping love will grow roots. I started picking up on the comments. "You still wear that kind of blouse," or "Here we do things this way with the kids," said sweetly but full of thorns. I caught myself thinking twice before speaking. I stopped correcting the kids, even when I should have. My advice turned into quiet thoughts. Because even wisdom gets old in the eyes of someone who doesn't value experience. At night, I folded my clothes with care, like I was tidying not just my closet but my presence, trying to take up as little space as possible. I felt like a guest in what was supposed to be home. One night I heard her talking to a friend on the phone in the kitchen. She's always around. I can barely breathe. She didn't know I was listening. I stood behind the door, holding my soul back from pouring out through my eyes. She was talking about me, and it hurt. It hurt like when you offer a hug and the other person just pats your back. Still, I kept helping. Faith taught me not every kindness gets repaid. But God sees it all. Every dish washed, every toy picked up, every tear swallowed. It all has a purpose, even if you can't see it yet. Caleb, bless his heart, was blind. He called me an angel, said the kids adored me, but he didn't see the real picture. And maybe deep down, I didn't want him to. Protecting your child doesn't stop when they grow up, but truth eventually shows up. And in that house where everything looked perfect, the cracks were starting to creak. I could feel it. And when the floor starts to creak, you either fix it or brace yourself for the fall. The barbs started as whispers. You fold the sheets wrong. The soup's too salty. Kids need a routine. I smiled, pretended I didn't hear it, but tucked it away in my heart. Because those words aren't just spoken, they're thrown. And each one became a little thorn I stepped on every time I walked through the house. One day I saw Jenna redoing the cleaning I had just finished. She wiped the floor like she was erasing me. Caleb walked by laughing, unaware. I smiled too, but inside I felt like I was silently saying goodbye. One day I heard Jenna tell little Noah, "Grandma doesn't make the rules here, okay?" He looked at me confused. And in that moment, I felt the thread tying me to them stretch thin. I ran to my room and sat on the bed. I looked at a photo of little Caleb in my arms. My heart clenched. I whispered a prayer, "Lord, help me not grow hard." Because we can be strong, but we have to guard against turning to stone. Dignity, when threatened, either rises or breaks. I prayed mine would hold. Jenna started deciding what I could or couldn't do. I'll cook today. You don't need to pick the kids up. You can rest. It felt like they were retiring me from my own family. I started waking up earlier, staying up later, looking for tasks that wouldn't bother anyone. But even my quiet presence seemed too much. Even my crochet became annoying. One day I found my yarn box in the trash. I didn't say a word. Just took it back and reorganized everything, like saying I still exist. I still matter. And no trash can get to decide that. I realized Caleb still saw me as the mother who raised him. But Jenna saw me as a burden. And the worst part? I was starting to see myself that way too. Doubt grows fast. Every day my faith was what kept me standing. I kept telling myself God sees what eyes don't want to. And I believed he was watching, because even hidden tears have a direct line to heaven. Divine justice isn't loud. But when it shows up, nobody can ignore it. I kept asking myself how long. How far would I have to go to prove I just wanted to belong? I'm no saint. But I always tried to act with love. Yet love without return becomes exhaustion. You know when you're being pushed aside. I knew one day the truth would surface. I just didn't know it would come so soon or so unexpectedly. It was Sunday. The smell of roast filled the house. The kids were laughing in the yard. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a timid peace. The table was set, silverware lined up, juice chilled. I put on my best linen dress, combed my hair carefully. I thought maybe today would be different. Maybe God was sending a new breeze. Jenna was oddly quiet, with rushed smiles. Caleb was telling silly jokes to the kids, trying to keep things light. I sat down and whispered my thanks. But all it took was one simple sentence for everything to fall apart. "Sweetheart, turn the tablet off at the table," I said gently. Jenna froze. Her expression shifted like a storm rolling in. In seconds, she stood up, slammed her hands on the table, and shouted, "Are you trying to run my house now, Lillian?" Her voice echoed through the walls. Caleb froze. The kids stopped chewing. The silence that followed was so heavy it felt like time had stopped. My heart pounded. My faith felt like a thin thread about to snap. Before I could say anything, she shouted again, "You're not family here, you just get in the way." The word family pounded inside me. Not family? I gave birth to the man who owns this house. I wiped tears and fevers. Now I'm just a stranger? I blinked slowly, trying not to cry. The kids looked at me confused. Jenna trembled with anger. And Caleb? He lowered his head. Said nothing. That silence hurt the most. His silence gave my pain permission to exist. I took a deep breath, picked up the napkin from my lap like gathering the pieces of my soul. I said all I could. "I'm not going to argue. and I walked to my room one step at a time. My eyes burned, but I forced myself to keep it together. Not for the grown-ups, for the kids. They couldn't see me broken. I closed the door behind me and felt the weight of a decade fall on my shoulders. But in that small room between a floral bedspread and handwritten prayers folded in paper, a new strength lit up. Quiet, determined, full of faith. Deep down, I knew this wasn't how it would end, not out of pride, but because God doesn't waste pain. And that pain was about to turn into the seed of something bigger. That night I lay staring at the ceiling, but the scene kept echoing. Jenna's voice boomed in my head, "You're not family here." I wondered if it was even real. I remembered making her chamomile tea during her first pregnancy, or staying up with the baby when she had a fever. How can someone who shares your table, your roof, your fears become a problem? I searched for answers in my chest but found only emptiness. Like my presence was some kind of unfixable mistake. Out in the living room, the air was made of glass. The kids whispered. Caleb paced. Jenna acted like nothing happened, setting the table, checking doors, wiping the floor. Like she could erase what she said with cleaning supplies. But words once spoken become scars. I heard it all through the cracked door. Caleb hadn't come to check on me. Maybe he didn't know what to say, or maybe he'd picked her side. That thought pierced me, but I took a deep breath. The truth will shine, I whispered to myself. Next morning at breakfast, the air was still thick. I sat at the table like stepping into a minefield. Caleb tried to act normal. Jenna poured juice like a flight attendant smiling through turbulence. No one said a word. Then my youngest grandson asked, "Grandma, are you leaving?" I looked into his eyes and almost broke. Jenna jumped in, "Of course not, honey, she just needs a little time." A little time? Who said that? Who made that decision for me? I stayed quiet, but my blood boiled. It felt like they were packing me off without telling me. Back in my room, I slowly folded the clothes I'd washed the day before. Not because I was leaving. Because I needed to sort through my thoughts. My hands were shaking. I grabbed my Bible, opened it randomly, and landed on a verse about Revelation. A chill ran through me. Then, like sending a letter, I said out loud, "Lord, show what needs to be seen. If there's anything hidden, bring it to light. But let it come from your hands. Let it bring justice, not revenge." It wasn't a rant. It was surrender. And when you surrender for real, the heavens start to move. I stood up with a strange calm. The kind of peace that follows an honest prayer. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose. Outside, the house was noisy. Inside, it was still. Jenna avoided my eyes. Caleb hugged me like he was saying sorry without using words. And the kids still called me grandma with the same joy. I was still there. Invisible to the adults. Irreplaceable to the little ones. But something deep inside me knew the truth was already on its way. And it never shows up empty-handed. It felt like time was standing still. After that dinner, nothing seemed normal anymore. Caleb spent more time locked in his office. Jenna avoided eye contact, spoke less, always distracted. The kids picked up on the shift in the air like little animals sensing rain before the first drop. I tried to keep the routine going. Woke up early, made breakfast, got the uniforms ready. Everything the same, and yet everything different. The house, once full of life, now felt like a stage about to collapse. Tension had become the new wallpaper. One afternoon, Caleb left his phone on the table. He ran out to the store, and I accidentally saw the screen light up. A message from Jenna to someone said, "She's getting suspicious. I need to take care of this soon." My heart raced. It was about me. I didn't know exactly what yet, but I already felt it. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't need to. That was enough to confirm my prayer had been heard. God was already revealing things, piece by piece. Truth, when it starts to surface, stirs things up even before it's spoken. And in that house, it was already making noise. That night, Jenna barely showed up. She ate alone in the kitchen, standing. Caleb ate on the couch, distracted. I sat with the kids and told stories like always. But something inside me was shifting, like a door was about to open. As I went to put the dishes away, I heard Jenna whispering on the phone, "I can't keep this up, I'm being watched." Her voice trembled. When she noticed me, she hung up quickly, avoiding my eyes. And that was the first time I saw something I'd never seen in her before. Fear. The kind of fear only someone with something to hide knows. The next morning, Caleb got a call. He left in a hurry, saying he had to take care of a few things. Jenna was on edge all day. She forgot to pick up the kids, burned lunch, spilled juice on the couch. I just watched. No rush. When you plant faith, you harvest discernment. And I knew this wasn't random. God was exposing things, but in his way, with precision. It was no longer a matter of if. It was a matter of when. And I was ready, not to fight, not to get revenge, but to witness with my own eyes, justice rising right there in the living room. That evening, Caleb came home with a faraway look in his eyes. He said we needed to talk. Jenna interrupted with another idea, a family dinner with everyone from his side. It'll be good, it'll help everyone relax, she said. But I saw the panic behind her smile. We agreed. But deep down, we all knew that dinner would be anything but relaxing. I spent the whole day helping prepare the meal. We picked simple but delicious dishes. The house filled with smells that, for a moment, masked the tension. Jenna rushed around knocking over spices, changing napkins, swapping candles 5 times. Caleb tried to calm her down, but she snapped back. I stayed quiet, arranging the silverware like I was lining up my thoughts. That table was more than just food. It was a stage. And God was the one writing the script. I already knew the truth was on its way. I just didn't know the arrival time. The family started showing up little by little. Siblings, uncles, cousins. Laughs, hugs, childhood memories. Jenna forced smiles, toasted too much, spoke too loud. Caleb did his best to keep things smooth. I watched everything. When I sat at the table, I noticed Jenna had swapped seats with a cousin like she was avoiding a certain angle. It struck me as odd, but I let it go. The kids were running around. One cousin talked about a new job. Another brought up politics. The evening carried on. But something was hanging in the air. Like everyone could sense there was more beneath the surface. Then Aunt Abigail, always the one with the latest news, said, "Hey, did you all hear about the bank? Someone's cloning cards around here. Crazy stuff." The words had barely left her mouth when Jenna dropped her fork. The clatter was sharp, like a slap. Everyone turned toward her. "You okay, sweetie?" Someone asked. Jenna went pale. Her hands were sweaty. Her eyes darted around like looking for a way out. Caleb watched her with furrowed brows. I took a deep breath. My heart, which had been racing, settled into the rhythm of a prayer. The light of truth was turning on. And no one in that room could turn it off. Caleb leaned in and asked, "Are you feeling okay?" She hesitated. "No, just remembered something." She tried to smile, but the smile didn't make it. The conversation cooled. The cheerful dinner turned into a stage of nervous glances. I sat tall, but inside. My spirit was kneeling. I knew the answer was coming. And when God decides to reveal, he doesn't shout. He shows, with clarity, with power, and always at the perfect time. That dinner wasn't random. It was the start of the mask coming off. Suddenly, a knock at the door. Firm, rhythmic. Caleb stood up. Jenna froze. Everyone went quiet. 2 officers stepped inside in full uniform and said, "Good evening, we're looking for Mrs. Jenna White, we have a warrant." One uncle dropped his glass. I didn't flinch. I stood steady. Because when a prayer goes up honest, it comes back sharp. One officer held a folder. He opened it and said plainly, "We're investigating suspicious bank activity. The account of Mrs. Lillian White was used without authorization. We have tracked transfers, purchases, everything." Jenna turned white. She looked like a statue. Caleb buried his face in his hands. The family was stunned. It felt like a badly written movie. But I knew it wasn't fiction. It was justice, and it had finally come to the door. The officer's words echoed in me, "Account of Mrs. Lillian." My account. I thought it was a bank error. Jenna started crying. Not out of remorse. Out of fear. I just needed to cover a few debts. I was going to pay it back, I swear. Her words stumbled over each other like chasing forgiveness. Caleb couldn't speak. The uncles whispered. A cousin shook his head in disbelief. I just closed my eyes. Not from pain, from confirmation. My prayer had been answered. Not with revenge, but with light. A light bright enough to reach even the deepest shadows. She cried. But I didn't feel anger. Something bigger was happening. The officer explained that Jenna wouldn't be arrested that night. Just brought in to give a statement. But the damage was done. The dinner turned into a courtroom. The dessert forgotten. I stood up slowly, walked to the sink and washed my hands. A simple gesture. but full of meaning, like saying I did my part. I didn't have to shout or strike back. I just trusted. God acted for me. And in a way no one could deny. When truth comes from his hands, it comes with authority. After the police left, the silence was thick. Caleb looked at me with tears in his eyes. Jenna, still sobbing, sat on the floor. I walked over to her, sat beside her, and placed a hand on her shoulder. She whispered, "I'm sorry I ruined everything." I simply said, "There's still hope. But it starts with repentance." That wasn't a speech. It was experience. I knew a fall could be the beginning of healing, if there's truth in it. The next morning I was up before the sun. I made coffee slowly with steady hands, like each spoon of sugar was sweetening reality. Jenna passed through the kitchen. She didn't say good morning. Her face was puffy, her hair pulled back in a rush, and she was talking on the phone. Her voice low, full of nervous pauses. She knows I have to fix this before he finds out everything. That's what I heard before she noticed me. The moment she saw me, she hung up. Her eyes weren't the same. There was fear. But not of me. Of something greater. She tried to smile, but it faded before reaching her eyes. "Did you sleep okay?" she asked. I nodded. This wasn't about politeness anymore. It was about masks falling off. I stirred the coffee slowly. No need to rush. Because once truth is exposed, there's nothing left to hide. Caleb arrived shortly after. He kissed my forehead and said, "I think things will calm down. Jenna just needs some time." I looked at him. I wanted to scream. She touched my account. But God hadn't released me to speak yet. He was still leading everything. Jenna rushed out, saying she had to take care of some banking stuff. I watched through the window. She could barely put the key in the ignition. Her hands trembled. She put the car in the wrong gear twice before pulling away. My grandson tugged on my hand and said, "Grandma, can I stay with you today?" I smiled and said, "Of course, sweetie." We played with building blocks, and every tower he built felt like a metaphor. Truth works like that. It breaks down what's fake and builds what's strong. That morning, even in silence, I already knew her castle was crumbling. The phone rang around 11. Caleb answered. His face went pale. "Are you sure?" he asked, then hung up and stared into space. I was sitting on the couch with the boy asleep on my lap. I asked softly, "Caleb, what is it?" He hesitated. Sat beside me. Said, "A cousin from work called. There was suspicious activity in Jenna's name. The bank itself reported it after tracing some unusual behavior." I didn't say a word, just held his hand. I knew. The prayer was starting to bloom. Caleb looked at me with broken eyes. No longer the steady man, just a son in pieces. "Mom, is there something you haven't told me?" I answered, "Son, when truth comes from God, it doesn't need to rush, it just needs space." He bowed his head like my words revealed more than any bank statement, and in that moment, I knew the real impact hadn't hit yet. But the foundation was already set. That night, Caleb knocked on my door with a strange look somewhere between anger and confusion. He sat at the edge of the bed and said, "Jenna wants to gather the whole family tomorrow. Sad, she needs to clear the air." I didn't say anything. Just kept folding a towel like I'd heard it all before. "Are you going?" he asked. "Of course," I said. Because when you plant prayer, you don't run from the harvest. Deep down, I knew this dinner would be more than a family meeting. It would be a stage for truth. And God doesn't schedule a gathering without a reason. I spent the next day in a state of readiness. Not for appearances, for reverence. I washed dishes, slowly swept the yard, baked a cake. Everything looked normal, but my spirit was on alert. Jenna fumbled through the day. Got a cousin's name wrong on the phone, mixed up dessert ingredients, left the gas on for 5 minutes. Caleb noticed but avoided bringing it up. He watched her with suspicion. I watched with compassion. Because even those who fail deserve a chance. But first they must be exposed. When the time came, the setting felt almost theatrical. A full table, pretty plates, clean glasses. Jenna was tense. She rubbed her hands, pulled her sleeves, fixed her bangs over and over. Caleb gave instructions, she barely heard them. The bell rang, guests arrived, smiling, unaware of the storm in the air. I welcomed them calmly, but my chest burned. The spirit whispered, "Stay strong." Because what was about to happen would change everything. And I had to stay whole. When everyone was seated, Caleb tried to keep things light. "Remember that fishing trip in Lakewood when Uncle Henry fell in the river?" Soft laughter. But Jenna remained absent. With each new guest, she tensed up. I could tell she didn't want this dinner. She needed it. Like she was trying to hold on to what was left before it all slipped away. But you can't hold on to the truth. It escapes. And when God decides no one can stop it. While everyone chatted, Jenna was furiously texting on her phone. Her fingers shook, her soul too. Then she dropped a plate. A loud crash. Everyone turned. She tried to laugh it off, what a klutz. But her face gave it away. I knew something was about to burst. Caleb stood up, grabbed a broom. I stood too, not sure why. But deep inside, something whispered now, and then it began. The tension exploded in a casual comment. Aunt Dolores, the ever-curious, said, "Did you see that news about the bank? They're tracking clone cards and fake purchases in seniors' names. It's terrible." Jenna choked on her juice. Everyone looked. Her fork slipped and hit the tile with a bang. "Caleb leaned over you, okay?" She answered with a weak voice, just startled. But her eyes were panicked. Like someone caught halfway through a lie. And me. I had no more doubt. God doesn't play when he answers a prayer. The silence that followed was louder than any fight. The whole family watched. Some looked away, pretending not to notice. But the ones paying attention exchanged glances. "Is something going on, Jenna?" Caleb asked again. She shook her head, but said nothing. A single tear escaped. Quick. Alone. I didn't speak. I just watched. Because when shame starts to spill, not even the best excuse can hold it back. The truth seeps out through the eyes, the skin, the body. And those watching, they know they're witnessing the invisible become visible. Caleb stood up from the table and walked to the kitchen. I followed quietly. In there, he said, "Mom, something's not right. I can feel it." I just held his arm and said, "Everything done in the dark, God brings to light." He swallowed hard. We went back to the living room. Jenna was gone. Someone said they saw her heading to the bedroom. Aunt Dolores commented, "I think she's not well." I knew she was broken. Not from remorse yet, but from the fall. And sometimes the fall is just the first step toward healing. When everyone had scattered a bit, Caleb called out for her. Silence. Then we heard a noise at the door. A car pulling up. Firm knocks. When we opened it, 2 police officers were there. "Good evening, we're looking for Jenna White. We need her to come with us. Ongoing investigation involving illegal banking activity." Caleb froze. The family gathered around. It felt like a movie. But it wasn't fiction. It was real. It was an answer. It was divine justice showing up right in the middle of the living room. And as the officer's voice echoed between the furniture and stunned faces, I understood this was the moment God had chosen. Not a second too early, not a minute too late. Because when heaven decides to act, nothing delays the miracle. Not even the most carefully buried secrets. The officers were clear. They explained that the account of Mrs. Lillian Me was at the center of the complaint. They had tracked suspicious transfers, unauthorized purchases, even cash withdrawals. Jenna tried to deny it, but her voice was shaking. "I just wanted to help. We were in debt. I was going to put it all back." Caleb put his hand on his forehead. The room filled with whispers. Uncle Harold stepped back. Aunt Zulide crossed herself. I stood still, breathing, like hearing a prophecy unfold in perfect timing. My mind went straight to that night I knelt and prayed, "Lord, reveal the truth." And there it was, out in the open. No filter, no excuses. My daughter-in-law, the one who said I was in the way, who never saw me as family, was the one who had betrayed me behind my back. I made the mistake of trusting too fully, of handing over my details, of sharing what was mine. But even so, even hurt, I didn't feel hate. I felt something lift off me. A weight that had crushed me for months. Betrayal hurts when exposed. But it also frees. Jenna was asked to give a statement. She wouldn't be arrested that night. The officer said she still had the chance to defend herself. But she was trembling. Like someone who knows they've gone too far. Who messed with something sacred. Caleb looked at me without words. I met his eyes steady. Like saying, "Now you see." He understood. He stepped closer and hugged me tight. Like when he was a boy and broke something and ran to my arms. And in that hug I knew my place. Had always been mine. The family slowly began to leave. One by one, some offered quiet apologies. Others said nothing. The living room, now empty, smelled like truth. Jenna sat in a corner, her face in her hands. I walked toward her. Not with anger, but with compassion. Because once you've been healed, you learn to reach out to those still broken. I placed my hand on her shoulder. She looked up at me, undone. And right then something new began to take shape. But it was still too soon to know what tomorrow would look like. What I did know was that dinner changed everything. But it hadn't revealed everything yet. Because sometimes truth is only the first act. And justice comes in more chapters than we expect. The moment still lingered in the air when the two officers returned holding a folder. Mrs. White, we ask that you come with us to the station for further clarification. The investigation has uncovered financial activity originating from your mother-in-law's account. When he said your mother-in-law, everyone turned to me. Caleb looked confused. Jenna went completely pale. What account? What are you talking about? She tried to argue. But the officers were calm, steady, sure of what they were saying. One of them held a document with records. My name at the top. My name. It was a strange feeling. Not shock. Not anger. Confirmation. I had sensed something was wrong for a long time, but I never imagined it ran this deep. Using someone's name is stepping into their identity. And Jenna had stepped into what was mine to cover what was hers. Caleb sank into the couch, his head in his hands. A cousin whispered, "Oh my God." The kids were taken to their room away from the chaos. I stayed on my feet, steady, like someone watching a harvest grow, even if the fruit tastes bitter. Jenna shook her head in panic. It was just for a little while. I was going to give it back. I just wanted to pay some debts. Her voice broke, her eyes welled up. But there was no more room for excuses. The officer said it wasn't an arrest, just a formal summons. But the weight was the same. Shame filled the room, spread across the carpet in lowered eyes and silverware forgotten on the table. It was like the whole house had choked on the truth, and no one knew how to restart the conversation. I looked at Jenna. The same woman who worked so hard to push me out was now sitting in front of me like a broken child. For the first time I saw the truth in her eyes. Not just the truth of what she'd done, the truth of her heart. A heart that was tired, hurt, and yes, wrong, but still human. Caleb still said nothing. Just watched. And I, who always believed God would act on my behalf, understood he didn't just reveal, he dismantled. And he didn't need noise to do it. Just time. Because divine justice doesn't need an audience. Just truth. And when the officer said, "Shall we?" Jenna just nodded. She looked at Caleb. He looked away. She looked at me. And something crumbled inside her. Not pride. What was left of it? Watching Jenna walk out the door between two officers was one of those moments you never forget. The street was quiet, but inside me everything was loud. The kids had no idea what was happening. Caleb went upstairs without a word. The guests trickled out one by one, each with their own look of disbelief. And me, I cleared the table. One plate at a time. Like picking up the broken pieces of a shattered story. Not out of duty, but because that's what my heart knows how to do, rebuild even in pain. As I washed the glasses, the memories came back. The times I bought her gifts. The notes I left on the mirror. The cakes I baked knowing she didn't like cake. Every gesture now carried new weight. She stole from me while I served her dinner. Betrayed me while smiling across the table. But God saw. And more than that, God protected me. Because through it all, my faith didn't leave. It stayed. It grew. And in that moment, more than ever, I understood dignity is the armor of those who walk by faith. Caleb came downstairs. Eyes red, shirt wrinkled. He looked at me like asking for forgiveness, but not knowing where to start. "Mom, I'm sorry I failed you. I let you suffer in silence. I didn't answer right away." I dried my hands on the towel and hugged him. Firm. Strong. Like when he was a boy and got hurt. He cried into my shoulder, repeating, "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." And in that embrace, I understood forgiveness is lighter than resentment. And when it comes from heaven, it heals deeper than any pretty word. After the hug, we sat on the couch in silence. But it was a good silence. The kind that comes when something has finally been resolved. Caleb asked quietly, "Did you know I suspected?" I said, "But I chose to give it to the one who knows all things." He looked at me, moved. "You're the heart of this home, Mom." I took a deep breath, not from pride, but because for the first time I felt he truly saw me. And that alone was already a miracle. But even with the truth out, I knew there was more to come. Because when God starts cleaning up, he doesn't stop halfway. The next day dawned gray, no rain. But the sky was heavy. Caleb stayed quiet most of the morning, playing with the boys. I was in the kitchen baking a simple cornbread cake. The kind that warms a room. Jenna hadn't returned. And no one mentioned her. It was like everyone was waiting for a sign. Something to say it's okay to move on. I knew it wasn't over. Forgiveness had started to bloom. But the wound still throbbed. And deep down I felt the real rebuilding hadn't even begun. Around 3 in the afternoon we heard footsteps at the door. It was Jenna, alone, eyes swollen, holding an envelope. Caleb ran to open the door. She stepped in slowly, not looking at anyone. She laid the envelope on the table and said, "Here are all the statements. The passwords, the money that was left. I don't know how to say sorry, but I needed to give it back." I looked at her. For a moment she looked like a different person. Less defensive, less proud, maybe more honest. The betrayal still hurt. But that gesture was the first brick in the repair. She sat on the couch. The kids ran to her and she cried. Cried like someone who finally understood the weight of the word mother, even when it's not by blood but by choice. Then she looked at me. "I know I hurt you, I humiliated you, and now this." Her voice broke. Caleb stepped closer, placing his hand on hers. "We'll work through this, but it has to start with truth." She nodded. And in that moment I knew there was real repentance. Not a rehearsed excuse. It came with tears and an envelope. I stood, walked to her, held her hands cold and trembling. "Sweetheart, hurt people, but God can heal even what's ugly." She broke down, not from fear, from guilt. And I couldn't hold the pain anymore. It was time to release, to let healing flow. Because if God revealed it all, it was to restore. Not just me, but all of us. And in that embrace between stumbles and tears, something new began. But there was still so much to rebuild, brick by brick, eye to eye, truth for truth. In the days that followed, the house felt different. Still quiet, but not from tension. The kind of quiet that follows a storm when the furniture is still damp, but the sky is clearing. Jenna started helping more. Washed dishes with me, picked up the kids. Caleb was more present, more aware. No one spoke of what happened directly. But everyone knew. The wound was still there. But this time it was being tended to. With real bandages. With longer looks. With respect. One afternoon we were folding laundry in the bedroom. Jenna handed me one of Caleb's shirts and said, "He told me he admires you more now than ever." I smiled, not from pride, but because I understood the weight of those words. She continued, "I never understood your faith. I thought it was weakness, but now I see it's your strength." I looked at her gently. "Faith doesn't take us out of the storm, it helps us through it." She nodded, for the first time without pushing back. It was new! And it was good. We started talking more about her childhood, the wounds she carried before she ever met me. My mom used to say mothers-in-law were always the enemy. I grew up hearing that. It hurt, but it also explained a lot. The truth is, most of what people do to us comes from what was done to them. And forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's understanding and moving forward. From that point on, I noticed she didn't just hear me, she wanted to learn. The pride gave way to humility. And that to me was a miracle in motion. One evening Caleb cooked dinner. Something simple but thoughtful. We sat down, just the three of us, like a family starting fresh. He held my hand and said, "Thank you for trusting God when I didn't trust you." I smiled, "Son, when you're a mother you pray, even when no one else believes." He cried. So did Jenna. And in that moment I felt something I hadn't in a long time, belonging. Not as a guest, but as the root of that house. As a pillar. There was still a long road ahead. But the path was open. And when God opens it, no one can close it. It was nighttime when everything finally felt still. I was on the couch with one of the grandkids sleeping on my lap when Jenna came over slowly. She knelt at my feet, eyes swollen, and said, "I humiliated you and I stole from you. I'm a terrible person." It hit differently. Because it wasn't pride anymore. Or excuses. It was confession. The rawest I'd ever heard. And still, I didn't feel the urge to strike back. Because when you've truly suffered, you learn the most powerful response isn't shouting. It's forgiveness. She was trembling. "I don't deserve anything, not even to be here." I looked at her calmly, placed my hand on her shoulder, and said, "Sweetheart, hurt people, but God can heal even what's ugly." The words came out of me like they weren't mine, like they came from somewhere higher. She collapsed into my lap, crying like a child finally found. Caleb stood in the doorway watching. He was crying too. And there I was again, being a mother, this time for both of them in different ways. That night we sat on the living room floor. Jenna shared stories from her childhood, her debts, her fear of not being enough. "I thought you were going to take my place and I took everything from you." Her words were heavy but honest. I listened without interrupting. Because some wounds only heal when they're spoken all the way through. Then she held my hands and said, "If you still want to, I'd like to call you Mom for real, not out of duty, but by choice." That felt like a golden thread patching something torn. It didn't erase the rip, but it made the scar beautiful. I answered with a soft smile. Being called Mom is an honor, but being seen as a mother, that's a miracle, and she understood. Caleb stepped closer and hugged us both. It felt like God was piecing together three parts that had long been out of place. Right there on the floor of that simple living room, a new family was born. Not by blood, but by rebuilding. And when God rebuilds, he uses real cement. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew that moment was sacred. Even without saying it, we all felt something had been buried that night, but something much bigger had started to grow. The next day, Caleb called me outside. His eyes were watery, holding a cup of coffee. He sat on the porch step and said, "Mom, I let you suffer, and it's tearing me apart." He couldn't look at me. The sun was soft on the plants nearby. The smell of damp soil brought memories of his childhood when he'd fall off his bike and run to me with scraped knees. Now it was his heart bleeding. And me? I could only look at him with tenderness, because real mothers don't hold grudges. They hold their children when they return. He cried, "You're the heart of this family, and I let you bleed in silence. I don't deserve your forgiveness." That touched me more than any pretty words. Because when a son recognizes the pain he caused, something inside begins to heal. I sat beside him and said firmly, "Son, forgiveness isn't earned, it's given." He looked at me stunned, like he'd never heard that before. God's grace is like that too. We don't deserve it, but he gives it anyway. He nodded and for the first time smiled with relief. We sat there side by side in silence, but it was a good silence. The kind that mends what was torn. Then he held my hand and said, "Thank you for not leaving." I took a deep breath and replied, "I might have left the house, but I'd never leave you." And he got it. Because a mother's love anchored in faith endures anything: betrayal, rejection, doubt. And still it loves. Not out of merit, but out of choice. And that choice is daily. That afternoon, Jenna returned from counseling with a calmer look. She brought flowers, saying it was a symbolic gesture to plant something new. She placed the vase in the center of the room, right where the night of truth had unfolded. Caleb looked at me, eyes filled, and said, "God didn't just reveal, he restored." And I agreed. Because when we pray for justice, sometimes God answers with healing. And healing might hurt at first, but in the end, it's what saves us most. We still had much to rebuild, but the foundation was new. And this time made of stone, not sand. The months passed like autumn winds, slowly but full of change. Jenna joined a women's support group at church. Caleb got more involved with the kids. And me. I felt part of it all. For the first time, not as a guest, but as the root. Life returned to normal, but with a different tone. There was more laughter at the table. Less tension in the air. Faith was no longer a last resort, it was the center. And that changed everything. Because when God walks through the front door, the whole atmosphere changes. One afternoon, I saw Jenna in the garden with the kids. She was teaching them how to plant sunflower seeds. If you take good care of it, it grows facing the sun. I smiled, not just at the metaphor, but because it was proof that God was really working in her and us. One day she called me Mom during a chat with the neighbor. Naturally. Effortlessly. And I almost cried right there watering the plants. Because being called Mom by someone who once wanted me gone is more than reconciliation. It's a miracle. A pure miracle. The family started reaching out more. Nephews, grandkids, even distant relatives. They all wanted to hear the story of the grandma who won through prayer. Some got emotional. Others asked for advice. I told it slowly, without exaggeration, but always reminding them I didn't fight with weapons, I fought with faith. And that faith, even when it looked small, moved mountains inside our home. I started writing down my prayers, and every answered one became a seed. A record of how deeply God cares about details only He sees. Caleb suggested I write it all down. Mom, your story could help save other families. I thought about it. Maybe someday. For now, I just write in simple notebooks with shaky handwriting, but each page is a testimony, not of perfection, but of restoration. Because what God did in my home, He can do in many others. And if this story touches someone, it's already worth it. Because no pain is wasted when it's planted in the right soil, the soil of faith. And even with everything calm now, I knew the purpose of it all was still growing. Today, when I look back, I don't see tragedy. I see transformation. I don't see humiliation. I see preparation. The prayer I whispered that dark night asking God to reveal what was hidden wasn't about revenge. It was about healing. And he answered, not my way, but his, a way that hurts but sets free, that exposes but rebuilds, that breaks but shapes. My faith was the foundation, my dignity the shield, and my silence wasn't weakness. It was wisdom guided by something greater. Jenna is a different woman now. Caleb is a different man. And me, I'm still the same. But with scars that became medals, wounds that now tell stories. The pain didn't define me. The rejection didn't erase me. And the betrayal didn't destroy me. Because when you place it all in God's hands, even chaos becomes a path, even shame becomes a bridge, even bitterness becomes testimony. It's not magic, it's a miracle. A miracle that began with a single prayer, reveal the truth, Lord. And he did. Today, when someone asks me the secret to surviving it all, I smile and say, faith and a heart that chose not to grow hard. Because keeping a soft heart in a hard world, that's where real courage lives. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to live beyond the pain. And loving again even with no guarantees. That's the real miracle. And it happened in my home in front of the eyes of those who thought everything was lost. If this story touched you in any way, if you saw part of your own life in it, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There are more stories like this, stories of faith, divine justice, new beginnings, and restoration. Stories that prove God still works miracles in the most unlikely places. Stories that maybe just like this one are the answer to your silent prayer. Because sometimes the answer God gives to me is also for you.